You are listening to an exclusive interview on Bass Musician Magazine. The interview starts now.
Hey everybody, this is Raul for Bass Musician Magazine, and today we have the great honor and pleasure of chatting with bassist, multi-instrumentalist, composer, arranger, Jason Everett.
Hey Raul, it's so great to be here. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Well, it's really mine.
For those of you that have been keeping an eye on our Music on Our Radar feature, just at the end of last year, I had the great pleasure of listening to music by Deep Energy Orchestra, their live album. And Jason is the bass power that was driving that work. And I was blown away. He is, for those of you traditionalist four-stringers, he is a more than four-string kind of guy.
More than four.
And there you go. So
and fretless.
There we go. So that's going to already upset a whole bunch of people. But let's go back to the beginning. How did you get started in music and on bass?
So my mother tells me that at 2 years old, she saw me conducting in front of the TV with Arthur Fiedler and the Boston Pops, which every time it was on back in the day, which was 50 years ago almost, on on the public broadcasting, was a concert every week with Arthur Fiedler, and it was always beautiful. At 3 years old, I actually remember having the recording on the little 45 record of Peter and the Wolf. And I remember telling my mom that I wanted to play the sound of the grandpa, which was a bassoon. Mm-hmm. And so I actually remember that conversation at 3. I started basically around 8 or 9 years old with, recorder, and I ended up playing clarinet. And by 12, I started playing bass. I taught myself how to play bass and bassoon that same time. So the bassoon became my conduit for most of my classical music experience. But I played a number of, I was always in the marching band in high school and grade school and college even. I had a full scholarship to Northern Arizona University for bassoon, but really my passion was bass. And as soon as I discovered the bass, and actually my introduction to bass was the Blues Brothers movie with Donald Duck Dunn. I just remember being, damn, that guy, he's driving the entire feel of this entire movie. And he's the lowest key, got his little pipe and his big old afro, and he was the baddest ass motherfucker in that movie in terms of his playing. And there were some bad players in that, and he rocked my world. So I started playing bass. I fell in love with Rush, and I taught myself to play by learning every Rush album. So my Sunday ritual, by the time I was maybe 13, 14 or whatever, was playing every song on every Rush album. My Sunday ritual, it was 7 hours of pure Rush, and I played and played and played and played, and Geddy is my original inspiration.
And then you've blended, again, you have the training through college with the bassoon, and you pursued the bass. Did you pursue any additional training in bass itself, or is it you just kind of carried on?
No, I never had a lesson. In high school, I discovered Weather Report, and I was playing in the jazz band. I actually had my own jazz band. I started writing. I did a couple of recordings with a small kind of jazz ensemble. We'd go to the mall. I grew up in Arizona, so we'd go to the mall at Christmas time, and we just sat up with our little Santa hats and start playing jazz, Christmas carols, and all that kind of goofy stuff. But I started writing for this group at a pretty young age, and I had discovered Jocko. And so when I got into college, I got picked up by one of the local kind of jazz fusion groups. And these guys were in mid-20s, 30s. And I started college pretty young. So I was 16, and I'm having to really, step up to be able to. And they had me, they're like, dude, you're solo. And I'm like, oh, okay. And, it was trial by fire. The real change is when I moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I connected with a group called the Little Green Men, which was totally spacey, avant-garde jazz fusion. It was insane. There was no limits. And two things that occurred during that part of my career. One is we would, it's freeform, right? So you have to listen, you have to be really engaged. Some of it doesn't sound so great, but some of it can be really amazing. And I'm a very groovy player, so I would often, even if it was out, just smacking the bass. I'm creating rhythm.
Yeah.
And one of the most magical moments was we would sit back afterwards and we'd, smoke a doobie and we'd listen to it. And I remember when I was playing, I would hit what would sometimes be called a wrong note. As Miles said, there are no wrong notes, right? But I remember that in the moment, I had to fix it. I had to make it sound right. And when I would listen back to it, I realized that the most creative part of my playing was fixing that wrong note. And that it wasn't a mistake, it was an opportunity. And so I started to really embrace really being on the edge and being willing to make mistakes and then having to be able to make them sound beautiful afterwards. And so that was a huge moment of growth for me. During that same time, I was introduced to John McLaughlin and Shakti and Mahavishnu Orchestra, which was my introduction into Indian music. Indian music is just so disciplined and they're so technically capable, but they're also improvising and they're just brilliant in terms of their skill and improvisation. So it's kind of this amalgam of classical music and jazz music with this level of technical capability that is just mind-blowing. And as soon as I got introduced to that, it literally changed my world. So all of that happened when I was about 18, 19 years old, and I went way in a different direction at that point.
Because we're talking a time frame, I know that there's going to be people that see this so that are not going to know what a 45 is. A 45 is a small record that you used to put a little insert in to be able to play on your little record player. It was before the 8 tracks and cassettes, which I know other people will go, what are those? But
let's just say it was a vinyl CD.
A vinyl CD kind of thing. There was a little needly thing that us prehistoric people used to listen to music on. The thing that was happening during that period was the evolution of music. And we'd been talking a little bit about this as we have had better communication throughout the planet. You've seen musical groups borrowing pieces of each other's music or elements of the music because they've heard it and they said, whoa. And so when people first heard the Beatles incorporating sitar with Ravi Shankar, that they were going, what is that thing? And the tabla beat and things. And they're going, oh, what's this? Or when Stan Getz was doing Brazilian stuff and starting to bring some of the bossas and the sambas and things into play, that it started becoming more mainstream, and you were hearing like Sergio Mendes bring in that portion of it, and then the outward flow of our music to those countries. And so we have now an element of purists, but we have this evolution that has Western musicians like yourself incorporating elements of all of your history into this kind of Indian music, which is part of what I perceived with the Deep Energy Orchestra album.
Right, absolutely. And so let me talk a little bit about Deep Energy Orchestra and how that album came about. I was really encouraged when I discovered Snarky Puppy. And I think that they've changed music in our modern day in a way, because they really embraced quality video. They put their content out there. When I first heard them, I said, wow, these guys are playing exceptional instrumental jazz music. Used to be a 4-letter word, jazz, right? And it's kicking, and they're popular. They've got millions of views on your YouTube. They're selling records. I would go to their shows. They're sold out. I went to one of their shows here in Seattle, the Upstream Festival. Ran into a couple old guys, but they were all 20-year-olds, and they're digging this music. And so I realized that you can actually create compelling instrumental music, and there's an audience for it. And part of it is reaching out through video. Mm-hmm. So I was awarded a fellowship as an artist in residence in Seattle at the Jack Straw Cultural Center, which is a huge focus on audio arts. And my whole project was to be able to record my album in that style with lots of video. And so I was able to bring Selva Ganesh, who plays with Shakti and John McLaughlin, played with a local tabla player I'd played with for years. Trey Gunn from King Crimson and the Security Project hopped on board. And then I play with a 7-string electric violinist who's Indian coming towards the West. I'm Western going towards India. So she and I, Radhika Iyer, work really, really well together. We've got a great blend. And then I put together a small string section to really kind of fill out the sound. And we actually recorded that entire record in 2 days.
Wow.
Yeah, we came up, we set up in the studio, we got our levels on Tuesday night, recorded Wednesday, Thursday. They're all my compositions except for Lotus Feet, which is a John McLaughlin cover we did, and Amazing Grace. Then we did a live show, just because we were all there in town. And it turned out really, really well. And, you know, at one point, Selva looks at me and he says, wow, man, we could tour India with this. And the next day, Trey's like, dude, we can tour Europe with this stuff. And so it's really been incredibly well received. I think we've had over 40 international reviews of the record. They've all been extremely positive. Mm-hmm. I ended up getting, I don't know if you saw the feature in Bass Player Magazine. They did a feature on me and the band in February. I also ended up being commissioned by the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber Orchestra to arranged this work for their 25-piece orchestra, which we did in February.
Oh, wow.
Which was amazing. And I brought all these people back, including Fareed Hawk, who plays with Billy Cobham, and he played with Sting when he was like 18. So we actually recorded the next record at the same time we came into town to do this thing with the orchestra. So it's just taking off, and having this blending of Indian fusion, prog rock, and classical music is hitting a couple of people. So, you know, I mean, it's been really an amazing experience and I think a big part of it has been that video and the live and the improvisational, and those elements, I think, connect with people. And I'm a groove player, so I think if people can move, that's also pretty good.
There you go. Well, and as we've talked about kind of evolution, and you mentioned the 4-letter word jazz.
Right.
Jazz in itself, originally, when it had its early times, was a music for the people, and it had that same element of, we're going to make it so that people can dance to it. Right. We're going to make it so people can hum it when they're walking down the street because they'll remember, you know, some of the phrases. It was also an unwritten music. A lot of it was, okay, you do da 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 da, and they did, and so they didn't have a book in front of them. But and the tunes got complicated. I mean, you look at some of that stuff, you're going, oh my gosh. And there is an upright player in the Northwest. He used to be in Bellingham, but now he's down in Portland. Chuck Israels played.
I don't know him.
He played with the Bill Evans Trio.
Oh, sure.
And kind of the funny thing, Chuck was at MIT, and he quit school to play bass against his parents.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Me too.
There you go. They're kind of like,
I got a full scholarship and I quit to play professionally. You know,
yeah,
so.
And they're like, "What are you doing?" And it's like, "Nope, this is what I want." But a big part of what he was doing was transcribing a lot of those tunes from back in the day, because he was afraid that if nobody did it, they'd get lost.
Sure.
And so while he still could, and he's got a real good handle on breaking it down and kind of digesting it, that needed to be saved. And at some point, jazz kind of turned into, especially instrumental, it got a little abstract where it could impress other musicians, where somebody's going, wow, there's that technique. But the general public was kind of going, what?
Yeah. No,
and you get into the, I think it's a wrong note, or this doesn't make me feel good. I'm not liking this.
Oh, yeah. Well, and that, you know, those are the fringes of the art form, you know. And, you know, I used to be of that Miles Davis school, honestly, whereas, like, I didn't give a shit if people liked what I played. I was playing from my heart. I'm an instrument of God, right? So I'm playing what's in my head and my heart. And if people like it, groovy. Yeah. And if they don't, okay. And that's evolved a little bit in that I started playing. Have you ever heard of kirtan? Kirtan music is this kind of, again, a fusion. It's an amalgam of our kind of Western yogic culture. I think yoga in California type of deal, and the chanting of Indian mantras. And so it's a very popular musical form in the yoga community because it's a call and response. So a singer will sing the mantra, and then the audience will sing back, and it's really meditative, and it's this, you know, you don't have to be able to sing well, you don't have to, you know, it's just really this interaction, and it's this meditative group kind of experience. Mm-hmm. What I appreciated for the first time is that there's a huge amount of energy between the audience, right? And so if I'm up there in my own world and I'm tearing it up, and I'm missing out on this collective consciousness that I was open to in this kirtan. So my music has become not more commercial by any means, so it's still pretty weird, but I think it's more accessible in that my grooves are usually pretty easy to move to, even if they're in 15. So the Return, which is one of my top compositions of late, is in 15. It has 3 different grooves. They're all very different, including one that's a kind of a modified flamenco groove, but it's in 15, but you can dance to it. And, you know, one of these days, and maybe on this next record, I'm going to do some music video on this piece and have, you know, I'm connected with a number of dancers in the community up here. So that's kind of my dream, is to be able to articulate that you can still move in 15 because it's about the feel. So that's been part of my evolution as a composer.
What I would say from what I heard as well is it goes back to that resonance and how it makes you feel. And I know that musicians, and that's why I'm always being clear, I'm not disparaging anybody's music, but what resonates with me, it's how it makes me feel as the listener, and then I can respond back in kind. And so,
right.
So, and I think it was one of the things that way back in the day, a lot of the popular music bands, what they had this hit, it was something that resonated with the people at the time. And so recently we had the pleasure of listening to Creedence Clearwater Revisited, which is 2 out of the 4 original members from Creedence Clearwater Revival. They're playing here at A&A, and a lot of the music of their time resonated with people, in part because of the message. I mean, hey, we were deep in Vietnam.
Oh, yeah.
Fortunate son. You're kind of like, hey, it makes sense now. It made sense then.
Right.
And so it has that kind of resonance. And instrumental music can do that as well. Again, I know musicians, a lot of times will take risks. And we had a chance to listen to John McLaughlin. I was on his final goodbye tour.
Right, of course.
While he was going through the Northwest. And he's an envelope pusher, but there's a lot that ends up resonating with you that you're going, wow, this is really getting me. Right.
Well, I'm glad you kind of brought up the resonance issue, because one of the things that I incorporate into my composition is storytelling. But I don't use words, right? You know, so there was a piece when I was in high school, again, in kind of concert band. I was playing the baritone then. It was by Gustav Holst, and it was Mars. And he has a symphony called The Planets. And so Mars, A, is written in 5. So it was one of my first, you know, besides that and Rush, you know, that was like my first playing, right, in an odd meter. And odd meters are huge to me. I mean, I think most of my stuff is very rarely in an even meter. It's almost odd, always odd. Just like me, I'm almost always odd. But the other thing is it tells a story. So as it starts very slowly, and it's got this build, and it's this basically Mars being the god of the war, is this army that's approaching the city. And so you get to hear the army's coming over the hills, and it's getting louder. And it's this whole storytelling element without words. And so one of my biggest pieces, I don't know if you've seen it, is Moksha, the elimination of all duality, which I will be releasing the final version on my next record this autumn, which is a 4-movement composition that talks about this spiritual principle of we live in a world of opposites. Male, female, up, down, black, white, hot, cold, everything yin, yang, right, is yin, yang. We're still one, but we're split. And when you're able to eliminate that sense of duality through meditations, spiritual practice, sex, music, whatever, right, death, you become one again. And there's this there are two worlds, right? We're either one or we're two. And so this piece the first piece is called The Village, and it's a very Indian traditionally sounding piece. I wrote it about 27 years ago. The next, and it's this very short kind of Indian type of thing. Then it goes into the battle, which is the battle between this person's soul, who's the subject of our story, and death. And then the piece, that's Fareed Hawk and I going back and forth with this totally crazy solo. Now, this piece, this movement is written in 3.5. Wow. Is the time signature. So now when I say to a Western guy, it's written in 3.5, their reaction is, you mean 7?
Yeah.
No, it's 3.5. The Indian guys, when I say, all right, this is in 3.5, they literally be like, oh, 3.5. I haven't played in 3.5 in 3 weeks. I'm excited. So they think about music and rhythm and timing very, very different than we do. So it's in 3.5. It's this intense thing. Then the third movement is the journey, which is this kind of being at once, this very open, kind of spacious movement. And then the fourth movement is the return, which is the first piece on the Playing with Fire record. But there's a very different version that I'll be releasing as part of the entire story on the new record. And I think the record is probably going to be called Moksha, the Elimination of All Duality. I have to talk to the PR people and see what they think. But I mean, it's my magnum opus, but it really kind of represents almost a personal storyline for me. And with this, the return being that soul returns back to earth in a new body, and there's still resonant echoes of the past traditional music, but there's this embracing of new music. It ends with a very flamenco. Again, it's in 15. It's a 15 flamenco. And so it tells a story. And storytelling through music has become part of my compositional style. And again, it's just been part of what's evolved in Mahavishnu Orchestra, and John McLaughlin had a huge role in helping, as did Rush. They were great storytellers, but a lot of it was the poetry.
Yes. Well, and with the time signatures, when we watched John McLaughlin, we noticed that usually there were two keys, like somebody with a B3 Hammond, the other with kind of synth and keys. And when one of them was not on the keys, they were visually marking the time signature with hand gestures. And we're seeing this going, and we're like, what's he doing?
Right. And actually, that's very traditional Indian. So they would count a 16 with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
Or that's their 8 beat, right? And so that's a very kind of standard way for them to visually keep everybody on track, because also what they're doing is they're doing all this math. The Indian musicians are very math oriented. So they have this just brilliant technique called a T-high, which is the repeating of an odd metered phrase within the regular meter that you do 3 times. On the third time, it ends on 1. So it'll sound like everybody's off, and then all of a sudden, boom, they come together, and it's like this musical orgasm.
Wow.
But when they're starting it, they're saying, okay, I'm playing in 16. This is not going to be right, because I'm not a scholar of Indian music, but it's something along these lines. We're playing in 16. I'm going to do a 5-bar phrase. 5 times 16 equals this. That means I need to start on this number of the beat to do it 3 times. And they do that in their head while they're playing. And so as soon as they do the first phrase, everybody catches that it's the T-high because it's off. Then they repeat it the second and the third time, and they're all together.
Wow.
And it's just this unspoken language that uses math as the foundation within the musical context. I mean, it's just, again, it's mind-blowing. Indian music is so cool.
There you go. Well, and this really should, anybody that's watching this is probably going to go, where can I see this? This is a big tease. You're talking about stuff that's coming in the future.
Well, my entire record is on YouTube. And in fact, I'm going to let you, Raul, premiere the entire video record. I've waited. I've premiered each piece individually, but I have the entire, I think it's 50-some minutes of video that I'm going to let you premiere on this interview.
Oh, fabulous.
And so people can watch the entire thing. I've got one piece there that's 19 minutes long. It's got this improvisational piece with Trigon. It's out of control. Selva Ganesh does Clinical, which is the rhythmic language of Indian music, which is, that kind of thing. And there are a lot of T-highs in there. But, of course, people can go and visit the masters. Ravi Shankar, Ali Akbar Khan, Zakir Hussain, Alaraka, Shiv Kumar Sharma. Just immerse yourself, Even Ravi's daughter, Anushka Shankar, she's a contemporary artist, blending classical Western music with Indian music, and I mean, she's brilliant.
Gotcha.
So yeah, there's a lot of way to figure it out. The thing about Deep Energy Orchestra is that it's a contemporary blend. So you're getting prog rock, you're getting Trey Gunn from King Crimson, Freed Hawk. Like I said, this guy, he's going to be on the next album. He was playing with Sting when he was 18. He was just retired as the professor of jazz studies at Northern Illinois University. He's been touring with Billy Cobham. He plays with the Flat Earth Ensemble, George Brooks, Garage Mahal. The guy is just a monster soloist. I've never seen anybody play the way he plays, and he's always on the edge. I mean, he's among the world's greatest players. Selva Ganesh again, he was on the first record. I'm hoping to get him on the third. He's a little bit on the second record. I mean, these guys are really special. And if your listeners are interested, please check out Deep Energy Orchestra Playing with Fire on YouTube for free anytime.
There you go.
And Raul will give you the link.
There we go. And the website for Deep Energy is www.deepenergyorchestra.com as well.
That's correct. Right. Sure. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So we should be pretty easy to find.
Gotcha. And your own website, I know it's a work in progress. You were telling me you were going to be doing some updating.
Well, it's antiquated. So it's Jason Everett, a.k.a. Mr. E, which is my moniker. And you'll find me on the web. It does have a lot of my history there, so I have quite a bit of music over the years, but, to be honest, Raul, a lot of it just doesn't really meet the quality in terms of the fidelity that I really seek. I mean, there's live music that was recorded even with the Little Green Men I told you about. We'd sit back and listen to it. I've got a piece on one of my records. I've got some of that information, some of that music on there. I mean, it's brilliant stuff. Even some of the, if you wanted to hear some of that really out stuff where I was just really pushing the envelope, it's on my website. But, unfortunately, it takes a lot of time to keep that website up to date. So it's just not up to date. I'm working really hard in the studio right now on the third record. I've got a deadline in about 2 weeks. I've got to finish a really challenging bass solo. I'm transposing from Paco de Lucia. We're doing a version of Ziria, which is one of my favorite pieces. And man, oh man, it's tough. It's pushing me as far as I can possibly go to play Paco. And we're playing it a little faster than the recording, so it's tough. But I need to be doing this and less of the website, to be honest. But it's so nice that you're willing to share my story with your listeners.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and this is a really good point. Also, we should talk about how you get your sound or your voice. A little bit about your gear. I know that I've recognized a Conklin bass there. You can tell us kind of start with that.
I started playing a Rickenbacker 4001 Geddy Lee style back in high school. And then I ended up finding a fretless Rickenbacker. And so that became my main axe with the Little Green Men. And under the influence of John McLaughlin and Shakti, I modified the original Rickenbacker to be an electric sitar of sorts. And if you want, I have a little video kind of showing that instrument I'll share with you. And so then I was always just playing the fretless. I converted that fretless, that 4-string, to a 5-string with a low B. And so I played that for many years. And then I really felt like I needed a little more headroom on the high end and bought a 6-string bass off of eBay, something really cheap, But I really loved, for soloing and chords and harmonics, I loved having that little higher angle. So I decided I was going to go with the 6-string fretless, and the Rickenbacker wasn't going to do it. So I started doing some internet research. Then I found the Conklin 7. I'm like, oh, 7 sounds even better, right? Might as well go 7. So I actually found, I bought the GT7, and it was fretted. I found one really cheap on eBay, and just loved it. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, I gotta move up in this world. So I ended up selling that instrument, which I never do, and I've always regretted. I sold it to a guy in Australia. He loves it, but it was a fiasco, and I missed that bass. But I ended up getting the Bill Dickens version. The neck wasn't a good fit for me. I really liked the radius and the taper of the GT7. So I ended up finding a GT7 on eBay that was totally stripped, had no hardware, pickups, anything. And it was fretted, and I bought that. It was like not even $250.
Wow.
So I pulled the frets, I refinished it. I actually hand carved that ohm symbol into it. This is the maple one with the Baduke inlay, and did all the electronics and rebuilt the instrument. And then, of course, realizing that video is the kind of the new medium, started producing videos. And as soon as I did Jog, which was my playing with the Indian vocalist, and he's going, and I'm doing all of that stuff, that really kind of put me on the map.
Gotcha.
And after that, Conklin contacted me, and we started working together, and we modified my design to be the ohm-based Jason Everett signature model that I play now, and that's on their website, which is the 7-string fretless. It's got a Cocobolo top and a yellow maple inlay and fingerboard. It's got the poly fretboard finish on it. It's a 7-piece Wengi zebrawood laminate with walnut wings. Do have the custom Bartolini pickups. I'm also an endorsed artist for Bartolini, and I've been working with Bartolini for, like, back when I was making the 5-string fretless and the Rickenbacker days. I was dealing with Pat and Bill Bartolini, and we were really tight. So we custom designed all that stuff together, and then also ended up including the piezo pickups on this. So I've got the digital MIDI capability as well as I've got that other sound. And then I ended up also connecting with Kalium Strings and became one of their endorsed artists. And man, oh man, the thing that's the kind of the thread that connects all of my manufacturers and myself is this willingness to be on the edge, to be outside, right? Conklin's always been on the edge. Bartolini, those guys, they're all super geeks. I'm a super geek, I actually wish I was a bigger geek than I actually am. But the thing is that there's this kind of crazy, like we're going for it. And the thing with like Kalium, all their strings are, they're pre-tensioned. They don't stretch. You put them on, that's their natural form. That's how they string them. So you don't get that having to retune. They actually come into their final position when you get them in tune. I mean, it was brilliant. Nice. Their sound, they're so balanced and smooth. It's amazing. And, the Bartolini, I can't even talk, what else can you say about Bartolini? It's signature sound. And so, with these 3 manufacturers, I've been able to really dial in my sound. And it's been this kind of lifelong dream. So I'm just, I'm like, again, I told you the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber Orchestra said, hey, well, your music sounds great and crazy. Will you write it for us? It's like, wow, this is all happening. This is super cool.
There you go. Well, and on the strings, I remember seeing Kalium Strings on the Gator bass, which was, 24 strings or something?
Right.
And it a big thing that a lot of I'll use the term loosely, the haters were all like, oh, you're going to spend all your time tuning. Well, not if they're pre-tensed like that. No, you don't. I mean, I played that. I played the Godzilla bass. Chris Cardoni is a friend of mine. It's an amazing instrument, and I wouldn't want to run around on stage with it. It's a little bit heavy, but my bass is pretty heavy too. But I mean, the sound, and it's just like it's amazing. It's an amazing piece of work, and it's a great showpiece for Kalium because it shows the entire range of their string capability. Like I said, those guys they're it's like the mad geniuses. I've got all the mad geniuses in my corner helping me out. Maybe we'll consider you among them. Oh, yeah. We'd be flattered. Is there any other elements that help give you your sound?
Well, from a technical point of view, I primarily play, my number one go-to sound is going to be the bridge pickup completely. I do a little bit of a boost around 800, and then I tend to pluck Jocko style pretty hard and right close to the bridge. So I get that kind of punchy, fretless sound. I can always move up the fingerboard and get a fatter, more acoustic sound when I need to. I don't do a whole lot of EQ changes. I mostly use my fingers for that. I really It took me a while to find the right amp. I play a Mark bass amp. They've not been receptive to me being an artist, so maybe this will change it. I like a clean, punchy, I like that Geddy Lee sound. I like that treble, a little more MIDI, a little more trebly.
Mm-hmm.
Still got low end, but you're hearing that middle growl, and that's kind of what, especially with the fretless, you get the moi, you get the growl in that mid range, and that's kind of where I live.
Well, Jason, it's so much exciting stuff. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us. We're so thrilled that we can insert ourselves here at this very moment, because we're kind of in the middle of the rapids of all this creative energy, which
right.
which is so neat. Folks, make sure we will share everything that Jason shares with us and stay on top of what he's doing. And if you are in the Great Northwest, he's obviously got a lot of stuff going on up here, so make sure that you take advantage and check it out.
Hey, Raul, I have some great news for you. Mm-hmm. So I just found out that Playing with Fire by Deep Energy Orchestra has been submitted for consideration for the Grammys for 2018 on the Best Instrumental Jazz Recording and Best Instrumental World Music Recording of 2018. So if any of your listeners are Grammy listeners, please check it out. If you're not a Grammy listener and not a part of that thing, check it out anyway. You can do it for free on my YouTube channel. So Raul, it's been great talking to you today. I'm so honored and thankful that I had the opportunity to chat with you today. I've really appreciated your work, and I look forward to meeting you soon.
My pleasure. You've seen him here, folks. Jason Everett on Bass Musician Magazine.
Thanks for bassing out with us here on BassMusicianMagazine.com.